Welcome back to another Outbreak Outreach webinar. We're so excited to have you here with this morning. Hopefully your communities are starting to return to normal, even if it is a new normal. As we continue to navigate through the COVID-19, HRG is committed to sharing industry updates and best practices with you every Thursday morning, so be sure to share these with your team. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. To make sure that we honor the time that we've allotted today, we will answer any questions that come up in an answer sheet that will be sent out later today with the remainder of the webinar resources, including the slides and webinar recording. We know that the current circumstances have forced changes to the way that we are doing business. Many organizations are now running lean and looking to lean more on tools that are already in your box. HRG Chief Executive Officer Steve Mccoy is joining us this morning to discuss how you can leverage data analytics and artificial intelligence to optimize your revenue cycle performance. Go ahead and take it away, Steve.
All right, thank you, Taylor. Good morning. My name is, as Taylor said, is Steve Mccoy. I'm the CEO. And just by way of a little bit of background, I've been involved in revenue cycle now for, let's just say 30 plus years. My degree is actually in computer science, and probably like a lot of you in revenue cycle, I kind of backed into a revenue cycle career. Actually, I was working for a software company in 1982, and I was tasked to write software to help automate the back office function for a hospital business office. And I've been involved in revenue cycle ever since. So over these years, I've seen the benefits of technology. I've seen all the substantial improvements that have come about from technology. So as you can probably imagine, I'm really deeply passionate about using technology in the revenue cycle space. And our goal here at HRG is to continually use and continually upgrade our technology to improve our performance, to reduce our costs, but most of all, to provide the best possible services we can for our clients. So welcome to the presentation this morning. Appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I'm certainly hopeful that this presentation will be informative and of value to you. So as we move into the introductory slide, we're going to share with you today a few of the ways that HRG uses data analytics and artificial intelligence in serving our approximately 120 hospital clients. So let's start first by defining how HRG defines data analytics. We consider it to be the process of taking data and transforming it into information, and to do so in a way that highlights not only problems that need to be addressed, but also opportunities that can be exploited. So as we go through some of these examples, we'll cover how the information can be used to also identify root causes, and thereby helping you to reduce errors and streamline your processes. And then we'll briefly touch on using analytics to monitor production of your staff and to improve the quality of the work staff is doing. And then we'll move into artificial intelligence, which is, as you know, commonly referred to as AI. And we'll discuss the various types of AI used in revenue cycle today. Then we'll move to cover some real-world examples and perhaps even convince you to implement some of the ideas in your organization today. Here at HRG, we use AI with three primary objectives in mind: to reduce labor, to streamline our workflows, and to just work smarter. In today's world of revenue cycle, we're really just deluged with data after data after data. Hundreds of data elements on just a single patient visit, thousands and thousands of records, hundreds of thousands of transactions, and so much of the time it can just seem like the volume is overwhelming. And then we're further challenged by the fact that we're working with disparate computer systems. The electronic health record is often separate from the AR system, which is almost always separate from the EDI system. So most of the time, we're challenged with the fact that these computer systems don't talk to each other. So bringing the data together out of these disparate systems can also be a daunting task. And then, of course, we have just the complexity of healthcare revenue cycle in its entirety. There's complex relationships between the data, there's complex challenges, rules to follow, and it seems like every day, every month, the rules become more and more complex. So as an executive or a manager or even a supervisor, it takes a real challenge to manage this data, manage the complexity, and manage the challenges of having this information in disparate systems. So ultimately, what we're looking to do with that data is to just boil it down to what I call actionable information. So we've all heard the phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees, and that can be so true in revenue cycle because of the volume of the data. So your and my challenge is to filter out that information in a way that helps us identify the distinct problems that really need to be addressed, and to also filter out the information that highlights opportunities that we can exploit. So that's the challenge of data analytics. So let's move into our first real world example. So be honest with me. How many of you get excited about looking at an ATB? Well, I do, and this is an example of one of our tools. So on this particular screen, what you're seeing is an ATB from one of our clients. This particular client has about 300 financial classes. So when they run a detailed ATB, it's several hundred pages long. And even if they run a summary ATB, that report still comes out at about 15 pages. So when I talk about high volume of data, this is a pretty common example. What you see now on the screen is a tool that HRG has developed to summarize the aging of an ATB down to one single page. This tool was actually built in Excel, so if you wanted to, you could actually create something very similar on your own. So let's explore this tool a little bit. In the first column, you'll see 6 groups or 6 categories of accounts. These groups are actually user definable, so the user can specify which financial classes they want to group together. Toward the top left side, you can see a category that says commercial financial class. This is actually, in this example, we brought together a little over 100 different financial classes and summarized them all in this one line. So as you begin to look at the complexities of the business office, you can see how there's opportunities to simplify your data in order to make and analyze where your AR actually stands. Another example on the Medicare line, actually it's brought together all of the Medicare accounts, the Medicare Advantage accounts, and the managed Medicare accounts. So it's hopefully you can see there's some flexibility, and again, we're looking for simplification, taking volumes and volumes of data and boiling it down to simple single lines that makes it easier to analyze and to decide on actions to take from this data. As we go across the top, it's the traditional 30, 60, 90 type of spread that we get in all of our aging reports, but a little different from what you might see in other systems. We also track the number of accounts that fall into each bucket. and also show you how representative, how many, what the percentage of the accounts that fit that particular bucket. It really, I think, makes it a pretty simple tool to analyze the trends that you have in your accounts receivable. And it's easy to determine whether or not your staff is doing a good job and you're getting the trends that you want in terms of closing out the accounts as they age. In this example, we've also highlighted some accounts in red. And again, so if you're a manager or executive and you're analyzing your AR, it's easy for you to flag those accounts or those buckets that you might think are a concern and refer this report to your staff to develop an action plan to resolve the kind of issues you might have in a particular bucket. On the next slide, we've taken that same age trial balance information and we are kind of comparing our performance ourselves against HFMA's best practice. HFMA's published this table that you see there on the left, and they've said in their guidelines that your AR, you shouldn't have more than 17% of your AR that's greater than 90 days, no more than 9% of your AR that's greater than 120 days, and so on. The chart on the right, the blue line represents the current AR, in this case, what we saw on the previous page. And then the red line indicates that if you were following HFMA best practices, that's where your AR would be. So as you can see from the chart, up until about 120 days in AR, this AR is meeting the best practices. But we kind of fall off that performance on accounts that are older than 120 days. So as we take a look at that highlighted area that is in green, that indicates where we're out of the guideline provided by HFMA, and that kind of highlights a potential opportunity. So if we were to bring our AR into line with the HFMA guidelines, that would mean that we would resolve or collect the $51 million, which is an opportunity, but it also indicates that there's 23,000 accounts. And so our challenge is, do we have the staff available to do that, or what will our action plan be in order to get our AR totally in line with the HFMA guidelines? So just in summary, this is a tool that was developed totally in Excel, and it helps us to identify the weaknesses in our current aging, our current ATB, and it also helps us in terms of identifying the volume of accounts so that we can make plans relative to how do we staff in order to do that kind of cleanup. Okay, time for another honesty question. How many of you get excited about denials? Okay, here at HRG, we do a lot of analysis on denials. We're really focused on analyzing how can we improve our AR performance. And denials, as all of us know, is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, a more challenging problem every day. So we have developed some tools to analyze A35 records. This is a relative example. So as you can see on your screen now, we're analyzing 3 months of A35 information. And in a method that was similar to what we did with ATBs, we allow the manager to group payers together into two major categories. In this example, you can see we have commercial, Medicaid, and Medicare. And as most of us know, the the ideal performance in today's environment with relative to denials is that you're keeping denials at a level of 5% or less. So as we look in this particular table, we can see that Medicare is averaging right around 5% most of the time. It leaped up a little bit in June, but Medicare seems to be in pretty good shape. Medicaid, on the other hand, is running around 10%, give or take a little bit. And then as we look at that top line with commercial, commercial is totally out of control. We're running at 20% or a little bit more sometimes. So just from this pure look at the analytics, we need to put some energy into to see if we can get commercial denials under control. We can then kind of slice and dice the same information, and what we've done here is sorted the denials by payer, and oh, surprise, surprise, United Healthcare is #1 on the list. I think just about every client we work with, United Healthcare is at the top of the list. But we can also see some other notables: Health Choice, Aetna, Blues. Again, help us to see where the payers stand relative to their performance, especially if they stack up against other payers. So, and this information certainly would be of value if you were getting ready to sit down and do contract negotiations with the payer. These first two charts help us to kind of see the big picture. And so now we're going to bring up another chart that actually shows us the actual error denial reason codes, the error codes, and shows us what the relative volumes of each of those kinds of codes are. This table is kind of starting to lead us into what we really like to do, and that is identify root causes. And if we can identify the root cause, perhaps we can come up with corrective actions and reduce our denial rates. So as we drill down into the root causes, let's go to the next slide, where you can see we've taken the reason codes and we've mapped them into departments. The department that is causing the denial. So the first chart it indicates the denials coming out of the registration process. So from the error codes, we were able to determine that either the collection of information registration, the front end, had errors, or the verification of that information or authorizations wasn't completed properly. And in some systems, we're actually able to identify the specific person in the registration department that generated the error. In the second chart, we're looking at denials that are coming out of the medical record process. From the error code, again, we were able to determine whether or not it was coding or diagnosis-related error, and of course, the up-and-coming medical necessity denials helps us indicate it's a medical record coding issue. And also, again, based on your system, we might even be able to drill down and find the particular coder that originated the error. And so then finally, the last chart, we have those denials coming out of the business office. And actually, most of these are when the claim is denied because additional information or additional documentation is required. So from these last two slides, this one as well as the previous one, we've tried to show you some examples of how you can use the denial information to understand, first of all, how your facility compares to national standards, and then secondarily, what you can do to negotiate better contracts as you move forward in the future. I'm going to just give you one last final data analytics example, and this is what we do as a vendor. We're really focused on both production and quality, and so we track and trend the performance of each one of our representatives. This first chart shows you the trending of people that are doing third-party follow-up. And then we also track data a little bit differently for the folks in our call center. Again, trying to determine whether or not they're meeting expectations from a production perspective. And then we kind of layer all of this information into a QA process, quality assurance process. The system helps us randomly pick accounts for each one of our representatives, and we put those through a QA process. There's a representative example of the QA where we determine whether or not they have done everything they could possibly do to move the account forward to resolution. And then this information becomes available to managers in terms of monitoring both production and quality of the individual reps. And it's also shared with the reps as well so that they know how they stand up compared to other folks in our office. So those are some quick examples of data analytics and what we do with data analytics here at HRG. So let's move on to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. And I think we should start with, again, with our definition of artificial intelligence. It is when a computer system is able to perform tasks that would normally require human intelligence. And some common forms of artificial intelligence in revenue cycle is the use of scripting, the use of bots, and here recently, natural language processing. And so I think the easiest way to understand natural language processing is if you look at computer-assisted coding. And here at HRG, we've done a lot of research on it, done some experimenting with it, and it's certainly adaptable to certain kinds of environment. But basically, CAC looks at the free-form text, determines the diagnostic codes and the CPT codes. It is rather expensive to install. It's difficult. You have to interface it with your electronic health record. It can be a little bit time-consuming, especially when you have to basically help your software through the learning process and becoming familiar with, in particular, what's appropriate for each one of your clinical areas. And so it can be challenging. As we looked at it for potential use on the inpatient side, we couldn't find anyone who had had good success in implementing CAC in an inpatient environment. So as we explored using CAC in our environment, we ran into some significant challenges. We have about 40 clients that we're doing coding for, and those clients use about 30 different EHRs, and in our environment, a coder sometimes has to code across multiple clinical areas, and so we just couldn't find a way to make it cost effective for our particular environment. So we have talked to quite a few, especially larger hospitals have large coding groups, and they have been able to successfully implement it. So it can be implemented and be successful in those environments where you have multiple coders doing multiple coders working in the same clinical area. It can be very successful using this. So let's move on to bots. Bots are basically, again, that it's a program, usually through the internet, that emulates human beings that are performing a series of actions or decisions. And And I shared with you the CAC, but which we have not been successful in implementing in our environment, but bots we certainly have. This is something we're extremely proud of, and essentially what we've done is as we began to deal with the challenge of finding accurate information relative to claim statuses, we initially started out trying to use 276 and 277 transaction sets to get it. And we found out that those didn't actually contain everything that you needed to move the account forward. But when we went to the payer website, we found that the information was available if you did a query on the website. So we set about developing our own bots to do claim status for our needs in AR follow-up. And to date, we've developed almost 50. It's required that you have a unique bot for each payer because it has to fit their environment and the way that they represent statuses on their websites. And so this gives you a list of the steps that the bots go through each night. So the first thing that happens is the bot logs onto the accounts receivable system. It runs a query to determine which of the claims have been unpaid, and we want to see if there's an update on the status. Then the bot logs on to the payer website, emulates a human actually keying the information to get the claim status, and then screen scrapes that data off of the payer website, brings that back to us, and then logs into the accounts receivable system and updates the patient account with that status information. And then finally, either queues the account for follow-up or puts status code, depending on how the AR system works for workflow, so that it's immediately queued for action the next day. So every night right now, we have our bots are going out there and scanning the internet and bringing back, any night we're probably earning anywhere from about 25,000 to 50,000 claim statuses. So bots, we've begun experimenting with using them in several different areas. We have some bots that are doing eligibility verification. We have some of our hospitals, especially the ancillary departments, are not very diligent about checking eligibility, and so a bot can verify eligibility easily enough. We are experimenting with. We've had I've seen other facilities that are using bots to do authorizations, mostly in the lab and radiology because the authorization is simple enough. And then we can do bots that will verify addresses through the U.S. Postal Service. And then I think bots are just ideal for any environment where it's repetitive and clerical in nature. So I think that hopefully I'm coming up on my 30 minutes here. What this hopefully has done today is give you some ideas of how both data analytics and artificial intelligence can be used in the revenue cycle process today. Data analytics in particular, again, to that old slogan of you can't see the forest for the trees. Data analytics is very, very helpful to help you gel down that data into actionable information. And we all know that AI is the wave of the future, and we need to learn how to begin to integrate it into the processes that we utilize today. It can be a very valuable tool to streamline things and to reduce labor. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Hopefully you've discovered some ways that possibly where data analytics or AI can be beneficial to you and your organization. So Taylor, I'll pass it on back to you. Thank you very much.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks so much. If you wouldn't mind just going to the next slide for me. Perfect. We will be sharing the webinar recording and slides in an email later today. Be sure to check that out and share it with your team or anyone that you think would benefit from this information. Included in that email is also a link to a survey. We would so appreciate you letting us know your thoughts on the webinar. We are looking at all the ideas that are coming in and responses and taking them very seriously. So if you could just go ahead and fill it out for us, that'd be great. Additionally, inside that email, you can request a certificate of attendance, and upon the completion of the survey, you will be entered to win a $25 Amazon gift card. Next week, we'll have our Executive Director of Training and Quality, Megan Smith, back again. By a lot of requests from you guys, we are going to do a follow-up on her initial presentation on telehealth, since there has been so many changes since that initial presentation. So be sure to share that information with your team and get registered. And then thank you guys all for joining us today, and we will see you next Thursday morning. You have a great rest of your day.